All right, everybody, thanks for coming to the History Talk tonight. I last gave a talk about the Revolutionary War in Germantown about 4 years ago. Since then, I've spent quite a bit of time studying the Revolutionary War, and particularly reading the historical memoirs of William Smith, Jr. I've given a whole separate talk about him, so I won't go too in depth on his backstory tonight, but I will use quite a few writings from his memoirs to illustrate what was going on here in the Germantown, Livingston, Claremont area during the Revolutionary War, particularly 1776, 77, and 78. So this map that I'm starting off here with, this is the 1798 Wagram map. Use this in a lot of the talks I do. A couple of things to note are the Manor House, built in 1699. That's the Livingston Manor House at the mouth of the Roll of Jansen Kill. Linlithgow Church. You'll see how Smith refers to Linlithgow in just a little bit here. Another thing to keep in mind, East Camp, or German Camp, as it was called, did not extend all the way to the Roll of Jansen Kill at this point. The cutoff was this line here, running from Roberts Point, approximately the location of today's Ernest R. Lashley Jr. Memorial Park, over to a place called the Pot on Dales Bridge Road. Today, Germantown encapsulates this northern tip here, but at the time of the Revolutionary War, this was the Lower Manor, or Chancellor Robert R. Livingston's domain, sometimes called the Lower Livingston Manor. This map here is from a collection called the American Atlas, published in London in 1775. This particular map, this is one of several maps in the Atlas, was done from surveys completed in 1723. So even though it was published for the first time in 1775, it was from considerably older surveys. And of note here, what's now Germantown is called Palatine Town, or the Camp. So around the time of the Revolutionary War, what's now Germantown goes from being referred to as East Camp or the Camp, and during the Revolutionary War becomes known as German Camp formally, and that's because the Albany County Committee of Correspondence starts meeting in late 1774. First meeting with everybody from Albany County at that time is in May of 1775, and they appoint committee men from all the different districts. And one of the districts that is formed in 1775 is the German Camp District. So that's a big thing, because that's the first time that what would become Germantown eventually has some sort of political distinction from the rest of Livingston Manor.
Yeah, comments on your voice a bit.
Yeah, that was, I think, earlier when I was in front of the podium. I'm right in front of the microphone now.
Putting in the map, but we're not seeing it on the.
Okay, yeah.
So if you might want to point it out on the screen.
Yeah, I'll try to use the cursor. I don't have a laser with me. So one of the committee men who were elected in May 1775 to represent German Camp at the Albany County Committee of Correspondence was a man named Johann Christopher Kortz Jr. His father, by the same name, was one of the 1710 Palatine migrants that landed here in East Camp and settled. Junior builds this house in 1765. You can see the date and what we think are probably his initials there in the middle. for many years misinterpreted as a hex symbol. But we think it's probably his initials, JCK, partially covered by the shutters on the building. Courts lived, go back just a couple of slides there. Courts' house that I just showed you a picture of, that's located here. This is on the Wegram map, 1798 Wegram map. This corresponds to the southern bend of Sharps Landing Road today, right near the original Reformed Church in Germantown, Reformed Dutch Church, and also the Lutheran Church. That was located, the site of that was on 9G. There's a house right on the footprint of that building. The Reformed Church, the footprint, we don't know exactly where the footprint of that church was, but we have a pretty good idea. It's in the general vicinity of the southern bend of Sharps Landing Road. So Johannes Christopher Kortz Jr., John Kortz Jr., has a very interesting career during the Revolutionary War. Like I said, he's elected to represent German camp in 1775. By the end of 1776, he resigns from the committee, and he is lightly, William Smith refers to him as being lightly suspected of loyalism. For whatever reason, I haven't quite figured out why. He ends up going from being on the Committee of Correspondence, which is coordinating revolutionary activity, coordinating resistance to the Stamp Act and resistance to British rule in the colony. He goes from that to being in prison for being suspected of being a loyalist. In 1777, there's a prison fleet established in the mouth of the Rondout Creek down in the Rondout area of Kingston today. It's referred to as Esopus Jail. And the court spends a good chunk of 1777 on a prison boat in the Rondout Creek down there. After that fleet gets broken up when the British come and burn down Kingston in October 1777, and the prisoners are driven over to Rhinebeck Flats, and a good number of them escape in that process. The ones who didn't escape were marched into Connecticut and held as prisoners in Connecticut. In Kortz's case, he is sent to New York City, where he spends the rest of the war behind enemy lines in New York City. And there's a view of the backside of the Kortz house. So that's the front of the house. There's a shot of the back of the house. These are the only two photos that we have of the 1765 Kortz house. It was torn down in the very early 1900s. The Kortz Jr., like I said, he spends the whole rest of the war down in New York City behind enemy lines. He puts together a will in 1783, and it's probated in early 1784. He leaves property here, both here in East Camp and also in New York City. Among the property that he leaves behind to his sons, John III and Christopher Kortz, were 6 enslaved people. And I think it's pretty remarkable that his property was never confiscated. You know, his property here in East Camp was never confiscated. John Kortz III ends up becoming the first elected town supervisor here in Germantown. So a pretty remarkable turn of events for this family to go from leaders in the community, among the wealthiest people in the community, representing German camp in the early stages of its existence. The father is suspected of loyalism and put in prison for almost the entirety of the Revolutionary War. And then just a few years after independence, 1788, his son John Kortz III is elected the first town supervisor of Germantown. And so Kortz is there, the southern bend of Sharps Landing Road. I'm going to move on to Philip Rockefeller. He's one of the other gentlemen who's elected to represent German Camp in the Albany County Committee of Correspondence. You can see he's represented here, P. Rockefeller. The Wigram map is kind of remarkable because Lower Main Street is not here at all. The Courts is up here. This is Sharps Landing Road, more or less. This is the predecessor of 9G, this road here. And this is early Main Street, Church Avenue, roughly. But there's nothing to represent Lower Main Street on this map. P. Rockefeller is here on the northeastern corner of Main Street and the predecessor of 9G. His house was built 1765 as well, very much part of the local building boom that was going on immediately following the peace of the resolution of the French and Indian War. A lot of houses, especially a lot of grand houses, built in what became Southern Columbia County in those 10 years between the end of the French and Indian War and the beginning of the Revolutionary War. This is Philip Rockefeller's house. He was a storekeeper. He also had 6 enslaved people on the 1790 census. He wound up inheriting his father, D.L. Rockefeller Sr.'s dock down at the end of Lower Main Street. He may or may not have inherited the mill property about halfway down Lower Main Street. Main Street in general starts to crop up and become the center of town as we go through the later 1700s and into the early 1800s. This area around Sharps Landing Road, gradually the churches leave for other parts of town in the early 1810s, and it becomes a less important area, and Main Street becomes the center of town. It becomes what we know of as the center of Germantown. But in the 1770s, it's a little bit different story. Philip Rockefeller's house here, torn down, I believe it was 1911 by Henry Arthur Lawrence. He's a descendant of Philip Rockefeller's, and he tore it down, built a house there in 1911. That house, don't have pictures of it, but it was picked up and towed and moved down to Crawford Lane, where it sits now. You see it. If you go out on the river on a boat, you can see the house that Henry Arthur Lawrence built to replace this house. And today, Storch sits on this site. So every time you pull into Storch from the Main Street entrance, you're driving over the site where Philip Rockefeller's house was. Philip Rockefeller also served as an adjutant of the 10th Regiment of the Albany County Militia, the Livingston Manor Regiment, sometimes called, and served at Saratoga. And I think we have a direct descendant of Philip Rockefeller here tonight. Yeah. So Philip Rockefeller, a very important guy in the revolutionary Germantown. This is a plaque. So we have a Revolutionary War monument coming. It's not going to be ready for this weekend, July 4th. It'll be coming sometime this summer. And this gives a list of the major officers of the 10th Regiment of the Albany County Militia. And you'll see Adjutant Philip Rockefeller there among the names. Also of note here is Quartermaster Christian Van Valkenburg. We'll see a little bit more on him towards the end. T.L. Rockefeller, D.L. Rockefeller Jr. He was the captain of the 10th Company, or the German Camp Company, part of the 10th Regiment. And this is a list compiled from the payroll records for the 10th Company. They were called out for the Saratoga campaign and for a handful of other campaigns later in the war. And this is my my compilation of their payroll records minus all the repeat, guys who served in more than one campaign. So I really did quite a bit of research to make sure we listed everybody, but also didn't duplicate anybody's name on this monument too, which is hard when there's so many repeat surnames. There's a lot of Snyders, a lot of Rockefellers, Lashers, and whatnot. I pointed out the Manor House site early on the Wegram map. This is the historic sign for it. You all drive by this on 9G all the time. I repainted this in 2022, I think it was. You see my ladder in the background of that picture. This is the first Lord of Livingston Manor, Robert Livingston, and his wife Alida Schuyler Van Rensselaer. They're both long dead by the time of the Revolutionary War. I just show them as illustration. During the Revolutionary War, Robert Livingston Jr., born 1708, died 1790. He is the Lord of Livingston Manor during the Revolutionary War. And this is a painting done by Judith Shapiro, a likeness of the Livingston Manor House before the railroad came through and cut off the mouth of the Roloff Jansen Kill. And this is at the Rojan Creek Boat Club. It's a photograph of the drawing. And this is what the mouth of the Roloff Jansen Kill looks like as of maybe 4 years ago. At low tide, the mouth of the Rojan is pretty silted in nowadays. So it's difficult to even imagine any kind of boat traffic getting in, even small ships or sloops getting in and out there. But it was happening. And we know that because when William Smith Jr. arrives at the Livingston Manor House, he remarked on October 14, 1776, "I dined at the mansion house. A large quantity of ball, chain, shot, and grape shot lay on the wharf for the forts at Ticonderoga, and several tons of iron bars ordered for the intended chain across the river in the Highlands, long since reported to have been constructed. While I was at the mansion house, an account arrived that the Whigs at Kinderhook had seized several Tories and sent them prisoners to Poughkeepsie jail. That for rescuing the latter, a party had risen, and in the skirmish, one man had been killed." And this is a picture of the dam in Ankrum as it looks today. There was an iron furnace on the site, multiple iron furnaces on the site. And that's where all this grape shot and chain, the chain for the first chain across the Hudson that connected Forts Clinton and Forts Montgomery was built. Part of that was constructed at this site in Ankrum, and then transported as long bars, iron bars, down to the wharf at the Manor House. I just showed you some pictures of. And then from there floated down to Poughkeepsie, where it was heated up and formed into chain links, and then transported from there down to the Highlands and stretched across the Hudson River from Fort Clinton to Fort Montgomery. In October 1777, as the British come up the Hudson River, they have land troops took Fort Clinton, Fort Montgomery by land, and then just rolled the chain up. So that chain was never actually tested by a ship trying to run it. The forts on both sides were taken by infantry, and then the chain was unceremoniously just rolled up, and the British ships were able to come through. The following year, the Great Chain at West Point was constructed, much more substantial chain, and that chain was not made out of iron from Ankrum. It was, I believe, from Sterling Forest in New Jersey, and a couple of other sites in New Jersey supplied the iron for that chain. Now, William Smith Jr., he's married into the Livingston family, very much part of the Livingston political party. In the lead up to the Revolutionary War, the political parties in New York State, in New York province, I should say, were the Livingston faction and the Delancey faction. William Smith was one of the biggest proponents from the Livingston faction, and he spends a couple of years in the early stages of the war, from October 1776 until July of 1778, under house arrest here at the Hermitage. This was built in 1776 for Peter Robert Livingston, the eldest son of Robert Livingston Jr., the third Lord of the Manor. Showed you a photo of him earlier. Peter Robert Livingston is married to William Smith Jr.'s sister-in-law. So their wives are sisters. William Smith Jr. and Peter Robert Livingston are married to sisters. So they're all under this roof at the Hermitage, late 76 to mid 1778. The Hermitage was later in the 1930s completed according to the original blueprints by Ida Ogilvy, and it looked like this. Anyone alive today would remember the Hermitage looking like this and not like that. Both of these photographs come from the Historic American Building Survey profile from the 1930s. The Hermitage was rather infamously torn down in early 1983. And in the lead up prior to that, the historic sign that marked it on Wire Road was knocked over. And but to return to William Smith's memoirs of what this is really the important stuff, because without his memoirs, we really wouldn't have a good picture of what was going on in this area, especially. He writes in April of 1778, a messenger comes from the Stat, which is Linlithgow. He refers to Linlithgow invariably as the Stat, to inform Colonel Peter Robert Livingston that one of the two prisoners there had escaped. They were going to the Albany jail. One, a 4 months draft for the Canada enterprise, who had deserted. The other charged with seducing several persons, Negroes, etc., to go off to New York. The latter escaped. So it's a man under arrest in the Stat who escaped, and he had persuaded several people, including enslaved people, to escape and go down to New York City behind enemy lines. The following day, pretty remarkable thing here, just in terms of Germantown history. Jersey Bill Rockefeller. You may remember years and years ago, I talked about John D. Rockefeller's genealogical roots here in Germantown, and his, I believe, 3 times great-grandfather was a man named Jersey Bill Rockefeller, called Jersey Bill because he came from New Jersey. The New Jersey branch of the family married Christina Rockefeller here in Germantown. But Jersey Bill comes up in William Smith's memoirs, mentioned there on April 29th, 1778. Another pretty remarkable episode. Goldsboro Bonyar is another important fellow in colonial New York politics. He's what you would call a moderate loyalist, probably even more moderate than William Smith himself. He remarks that Bonyar leaves us. I rode with him 3 miles into the East Camp. He reveals that Colonel Livingston, which is in Smith's lingo, when he says Colonel L or Colonel Livingston, he's talking about Robert Livingston Jr., the third Lord of the Manor, by his military title as a young man rather than as his baronial title. Duane is James Duane. That's a son-in-law of the third Lord of the Manor. He reveals that they had divulged his conversation there last, which exposed him to popular fury. Said that he would not seek to see Duane anymore, declared that he would not visit the colonel again for half his estate. So there's a bit of a falling out there between Goldsboro and Bonyar and Robert Livingston Jr. Now, I mentioned Claremont earlier. This is Margaret Beekman Livingston. Her husband, Robert the Judge Livingston, passed away 1775. Her famous son, Chancellor Robert R. Livingston, is portrayed there. As you know, October 1777, the British troops come up the Hudson River after taking Forts Clinton and Montgomery. Their ships come up past Kingston to somewhere off of Saugerties. They burn the city of Kingston. They also come over the next day or two and burn down not just Claremont, but also Belvedere. Belvedere was Robert R. Livingston's estate at the time. And this is Smith's account, a rather breezy account because there's a lot going on at this time in Smith's memoirs. Nicholas Hoffman's house, presumably down in Tivoli area, burned down. Also that of Robert R. Livingston and his mother's. Some people's houses were left untouched. And that's a kind of curious thing to record because it probably reflects their political leanings that the British soldiers left those two places untouched. General Israel Putnam, he would be court-martialed for his performance at the battles of Fort Clinton and Montgomery. But before we can get to those court-martials, he's trying to defend the valley. So he's there with 5 field pieces and just over 1,000 men yesterday at the Flats, meaning Rhinebeck Flats, coming this night to Red Hook. Colonel Livingston, that's Robert Livingston Jr., and his family lodged at Mr. Patterson's. Mr. Patterson was another son-in-law of Robert Livingston Jr., lived somewhere in Lithgow, not quite sure exactly where he lived, but he's near the manor house somewhere. So they lodged at Patterson's and then fled the next morning to Ankrum to get away from the river and the British troops coming up on the river. This is an old photograph of the Claremont mansion, 1910 or so, give or take. This is, I think, from the Emily Hover album that we have at the history department. That building, that what you see today, that version of Claremont was what was rebuilt after the original Claremont was burned down during the Revolutionary War. This is Margaret Beekman Livingston's letter to Governor George Clinton, asking that 3 men be excused from their military duty, and this because they're skilled masons, carpenters, brick burners, laborers, line breakers, and burners. And those gentlemen were Conrad Lasher Jr., Henry Timmerman or Zimmerman, written both ways in records from this era. They're both from the 10th Company, that's T.O. Rockefeller Jr.'s company, and also Philip Schultes, who's under Captain Philip Smith in one of the manor regiments, or manor companies, I should say. So this you'll see this cited fairly common. This is a pretty well-known letter from Margaret Beekman Livingston to Governor George Clinton. And this is Smith's account, more or less of the same thing. Mr. Clinton gave a protection from military duty not only to the workmen in rebuilding Kingston, but to those employed by Robert R. Livingston, Chancellor Robert R. Livingston, who began the work on his own house and changed his lodgings from the Stat to 1 Cluns for superintending it. And this is pretty noteworthy because it tells us that Chancellor Robert Livingston, in the winter of 1777, going into 1778, was staying with his cousins in the Lithgow during the winter of 77, 78. And then he moves down to take lodgings with one of the Klum families. On the Wigram map, I believe there's one Klum family in far southern Germantown, and then there's several more Klum families along today's Route 6, so much closer to the area of Claremont than Lithgow. And that little tidbit about Chancellor Livingston during the war years, I didn't know until I read the Smith's memoirs here. This is the Errol House. So Chancellor Livingston was at that point in 1778 was probably superintending the rebuilding of his mother's house, Claremont, which is the Claremont we know today. He took quite a bit longer to build the Errol House. He didn't finish this, I believe, until 1793, so quite a bit after the war. And we have a couple of shots of it. This burned down very early 1900s, supposedly from passing train threw off a coal ember, but burned down somewhat conspicuous because the property had just come back into the possession of John Henry Livingston. That house had been sold out of the Livingston family and had just come back into the Livingston family and burned very shortly after the property transaction was complete. And this is what you know today as the Errol House ruins at Claremont State Historic Site. This is a photograph from before the fence was built around it. This is a remarkable episode. Won't read the whole thing, it's kind of long, but this is a loyalist raid into northeastern Germantown in 1778. And this is William Smith's entry for June 11th, 1778, and relays that a party of 30 armed men came near Peter R. Livingston, PRL. That's the Hermitage property where Smith and PRL lived. The 30 armed men came by in the middle of the night, boarded the Rojan in the area of Ford Road, which is near where the Hermitage was. They crossed into German camp, and they find Christian Moore, our nearest neighbor to the west, and he was tortured, tied up, forced to by a confession, rope around his neck, threatened with drawn bayonets. They carried off whatever valuables they could find from Christian Moore's house. And then they moved on. The gang of 30 armed men moved on to the neighboring houses of Philip Hagedorn and Tick. And then Smith reports that he heard several discharges of musketry. The loss at Moore's farmstead is considerable. And the men the loyalists were wet from fording the creek, and they must have passed our house on the way to Moore's and probably near us. The 4 houses that were robbed by this group of 30 armed men, all belonging to zealous Whigs, meaning people who are in support of the revolution. You know, they want independence from Great Britain. I'll show you just briefly back to the 1798 Wigram map. The house labeled Henry W. Livingston is cut off here. This is the Hermitage. Here, this is Tiviotdale, widow Livingston. By 1798, the Peter R. Livingston is dead. That property is passed on to Henry W. Livingston. Walter Livingston is also dead, and his wife, widow Livingston, here given on the map. On the Wigram map, there's a Moore homestead here, very near the location of today's Dales Bridge Road, the hill going down towards Dales Bridge. Tick or Dick is here. This is the approximate area of County Route 8 and Eastern Parkway. The roads leading to it are considerably different than they are today, but this is the general vicinity of where we think Smith was describing this loyalist raid. Moore is over here. The Dick homestead is here. Hagedorn, or excuse me, not Hagedorn. Yeah, Philip Hagedorn, I believe, was in the area here. This is now the Golden Farm on Dales Bridge Road near Eastern Parkway. From the Golden map era on, so 1741, on close to Revolutionary War times, that was known as the Hagedorn Farm. There was various Hagedorns owned that land. There's no actual Hagedorns given on the Uyghur map. That the most likely place where that would have been would be there at the Dales Bridge Road and Eastern Parkway. Another place with some serious Revolutionary War history is a place called the Callender House. This is on County Route 19, between 19 and the Roloff Jansen Kill, built by Samuel Tenbrook, who served as a colonel in the 10th Regiment. He only lived there for maybe 2 years, 3 years, and sold it to General Harry Livingston, as he's given there. His actual name is Hendrik Livingston. He's a son of the third Lord of the Manor, a very high-ranking general in the Continental Army during the Revolutionary War. And one thing to take a look at is the historic sign written in 1932 or thereabouts, wrote that Harry Livingston's descendants held the Callender House until 1861. And this is how it looks on the Uyghur map. General Livingston here. Colonel Tenbrook, that's Colonel Samuel Tenbrook. At this point, he sold this house, the Callender House, on the Livingston side of the Rojan, and moved into his ancestral home, the Bowery, on the Claremont side of the Rojan. This is Lake Charlotte, now known as Lake Taconic. General Livingston here. A couple of HABs, Historic American Building Survey, photos of the Callender House as it looked in the 1930s. I've never seen this house with my own eyes, and I haven't seen any recent photographs of it either. There's another shot of it from the 1930s. Like I said, Colonel Samuel Tenbrook, this is the Bowery just across the Roloff Jansen Kill from the Callender House. This is the final resting place of many of the Tenbrooks, including Colonel Samuel Tenbrook and others who fought in the Revolutionary War. This is the cemetery at the Bowery, decorated with some cannons, probably Civil War cannon. Another interesting aspect of Revolutionary War history here in southwestern Columbia County is the story of Colonel John McKinstry. Now, he was a colonel. He was involved in the Battle of the Cedars, which occurred in Canada outside Montreal in I believe April 1776. It was follow-up campaign to the invasion of Quebec, where Richard Montgomery famously was killed in December 1775. McKinstry was tied up to a stake and about to be executed during the Battle of the Cedars. And as the story goes, McKinstry gave the secret Masonic sign of distress. Joseph Brant, the Mohawk warrior, allied with the British, also a Freemason, saw that signal that McKinstry gave and saved, basically, essentially spared John McKinstry's life there at the Battle of the Cedars. And then after the war, to reconcile, John McKinstry became a mover and shaker in the early years of Hudson, New York. And Joseph Brant visited Hudson at least once or twice after the war and visited with McKinstry. And at the Linlithgow Reformed Church of Livingston, this is in the hamlet of Livingston near Town Hall, near the Livingston History Barn and the post office. And in the churchyard, in the back corner of the churchyard, there's this brick vault with a marble, thin obelisk at the top. And that obelisk has been cleaned up a little bit since I took this photo. The vines have been cut back. It says Colonel John McKinstry, and I believe Dr. John McKinstry Family Vault, erected in the year of our Lord 1818. And if you go poking around on the internet, you may see that there are sources that say Colonel John McKinstry is buried on the McKinstry family farm out in Hillsdale. However, we have pretty good indications that he's buried here with his family in this vault here. I have it on good report that the keys to this vault hang on a nail just outside, literally just outside. So I've heard that you can just go walk into this vault, but I've never done it myself. But other braver historians than me, I go in here and look around.
October 31.
Yeah, yeah.
Just walk.
Another interesting kernel of Revolutionary War history with a tie back here to Germantown is this is General Nicholas Herkimer. He was the commander of the Tryon County Militia. This is a depiction of him at the Battle of Oriskany in August of 1777. This is the western prong of the Saratoga campaign along the Mohawk River. He was struck by a musket ball in the leg and disabled. He lives about another 10 days after this, commanded his militia at Oriskany from that perch, that seated perch. Oriskany was a very, very bloody battle. Almost everybody involved at Oriskany who was under Herkimer, these are all Palatine descendants. These are all sons and grandsons of Palatine settlers, many of whom were here at East Camp. This is the obelisk erected to Herkimer in the early 1900s at his home. Nicholas Herkimer's parents, Johann Jost Herkimer and Katerina Petrie, and three of his grandparents, I believe his maternal grandfather, Petrie, died before the Palatine migration. But three of his grandparents and both of his parents as young children, 9, 10 years old, were here in East Camp for a couple of years, 1710 through 1712. They were among the Palatines who left for the Schoharie Valley, and they were among the first Palatines who made it to the Mohawk Valley, wound up with a very choice piece of land along the Mohawk River near Little Falls, and they became wealthy because they were able to charge the boatmen who were moving cargo up and down the Mohawk River and down the Hudson River. You get to Little Falls, that's the second really big obstruction on the Mohawk River. You have Cohoes Falls down by Schenectady, and then get to Little Falls. By that point, a lot of boatmen were ready to give up. They're rowing against the current on the Mohawk River, and they get to the second big obstruction, and many of them would want to just they would want to just sell their cargo and get whatever money they could get for their cargo. So the Herkimers, with that choice position on the Mohawk River, were able to capitalize on the fact that many of the boatmen didn't want to go any further. They didn't want to go all the way to Oneida Lake or even Lake Ontario. But even if the boatmen didn't want to sell out, the Herkimers also were able to charge a toll effectively, for the boatmen to travel across their land because they had to portage around Little Falls. So whether the boatmen were giving up or not, the Herkimers were making a few bucks off of them, and the family became very wealthy out there in the Mohawk Valley. Another interesting anecdote from Revolutionary War in our area. This is what we now call Hetling Park. There's a beautiful new playground here beyond the kiosk here, soccer fields, baseball fields, Veterans Monument at the top of the hill. And this is a little description from the historical sketch of the town of Claremont, written by Thomas Hunt in 1928. He was quoting Harold Wilson's Notes and Reminiscences. And Harold Wilson wrote, "When the final victory came, it is said that the people of the village of Claremont celebrated the victory over Lord Cornwallis by roasting an ox on the hill just back of the church. The field of which this hill is part of is still known as Cornwallis Field." Just a little piece of forgotten history. Nobody in my lifetime has ever called it Cornwallis Hill or Field. Nobody in Alvin's lifetime probably ever called it Cornwallis Field either, unless it was when it was really young. Yeah. Another very interesting thing in William Smith's memoirs, I believe we have a primary reference to the Marquis de Lafayette. He was going up to visit the Oneida Nation in early 1778. He eventually goes up there, visits the Oneidas, and brings roughly 50 Oneida warriors back down to Valley Forge with him. And they're involved in battles in May and June 1778 in the vicinity of Valley Forge in Philadelphia. But on the Marquis de Lafayette's way up to the Oneida Nation, he dined at the Manor House, according to Smith's memoirs. Peter Livingston, that's Smith is living with Peter Livingston, tells me that the Marquis de Lafayette dined at his father's last Monday and then went to Albany. Duane went with him. The Marquis is ordered by Congress, I suppose, to assist in procuring the Indians to escort him. And that's exactly what Lafayette did. He went up to the Oneida Nation and returned to Valley Forge with about 50 Oneida warriors to help to assist in the patriot cause. Here at Cheviot Cemetery or East Camp Cemetery, along Cheviot Extension here, is the grave of Christian Van Valkenburg. I cleaned this gravestone maybe 3 or 4 years ago now. We saw him on the monument. He's the quartermaster of the 10th Regiment of Livingston Manor Regiment. One of, I think, 5 Revolutionary War veterans buried at Cheviot Cemetery. So one more story here. At the history department, we have this little 4.5 or 5 pound ball, artillery ball. You can see it in my hand there on the right. It was found while digging up a buried oil tank, an underground oil tank, around 1990 or so, shortly after the town of Germantown acquired the parsonage. And that's Pete Lasher and O.C. Trimble, former town maintenance highway employees. And Pete was showing O.C. this cool cannonball that was just dug up out of the ground right next to the building at the parsonage. The caption there in the newspaper references Helen Henderson, a local history buff, says she has no idea how the cannonball came to its location, though she pointed out that the former owners specialized in collecting Columbia County memorabilia. That's awfully far down in the ground to just have been accidentally placed there by the Eckert family who owned the parsonage. So we do have a couple of clues from Smith's memoirs. In October 1777, General Israel Putnam He has troops lined all the way from Peekskill all the way up to the Manor House, the Livingston Manor House, roughly 2,000 or 3,000. A really thin line defending the Hudson River Valley from British incursions on the Hudson River in that time. Charles Webb's regiment is now at the camp church with 2 pieces of ordnance. General Putnam posted guards this day at the Manor House and then dined at Mr. Patterson's. Mr. Patterson, as we said earlier, lived somewhere in Linlithgow during the Revolutionary War. This little piece here, Charles Webb's regiment now at the camp church with 2 pieces of ordnance. Whenever I would hear Smith's memoirs referenced in reference to Germantown history, it was always this one line, essentially proving that there was Revolutionary War activity in Germantown. It's a little bit ambiguous because there's 2 churches in Germantown at that time. There's the Reformed Church and the Lutheran Church. But there are, according to this primary document, there are Continental soldiers in Germantown with artillery. And he continues. Yeah. So that's essentially all I got. I had a couple of more slides, but I did want to share with you that on July 4th there will be an event at Claremont State Historic Site, Revolutionary War celebration, America 250 celebration. I'll be there doing a table, and then we also have the fireworks here in Germantown on Sunday, July 5th. I believe the gates open at 4 p.m. and fireworks at 9:30. So please come out for that. Also, in the last 2 days, we have a Liberty pole here in Palatine Park. That was put up 2 mornings ago. I have to go decorate it tomorrow morning. So make sure to look out for that. It's on the far side of the lake at Palatine Park. And with that, I'd be happy to take any questions. Like I said, we had 49 slides. I feel like I just barely scratched the surface of the topic. So if anyone on Zoom or in person has any questions for me, I'd be happy to take it. Yes, Alvin.
The importance of the
So Liberty Pole, not really a direct connection to Germantown per se. Liberty poles were kind of a New York City Sons of Liberty thing. The first one was put up a couple of years after the Stamp Act, and most of them were cut down by British troops who were stationed in New York City. Even 10 years before the Revolutionary War, New York City is kind of a military town, similar in a way to like San Diego, California is now, with just mass quantities of military men stationed there. Every Liberty pole that was put up as a protest against the Stamp Act was cut down by those British troops until 1770. The Sons of Liberty in New York City put up the tallest pole they had put up yet, and then covered the bottom 30 feet or so with metal, making it difficult to be cut down. And that 1770 Liberty pole lasted right up until the British occupied New York City in 1776. Most of you are aware a good portion of New York City burns down shortly before the British take possession of New York City, and shortly after that, the last Liberty pole in New York City was cut down. So we have something of a replica. It's not an exact replica, but it's definitely inspired by that 1770 Liberty pole in New York City. Any other questions?
What about the gun bringing? There is something about
Yeah, so there'll be at 2:50 p.m. on Saturday, July 4th, 2 days from now. There will be churches all across America will be ringing their bells in unison. In the Eastern time zone, it'll be at 2:50 and go back an hour, back an hour, back an hour, going west across the country. But I know the Reformed Church in Germantown will be ringing their bell. I'm not sure if any other local churches will be doing it or not.
I'll be ringing the bell at
Yep.
St. Mark's.
Cool. That's great. So 2:50 p.m. On Saturday, July 4th. If you want to find a local church to ring a bell at, that would be the time to do it. So. Any other questions? Yes, Martin.
There's something about, there's a big ships down in New York City, but there might be
Yes.
a boat coming up from Albany.
Yeah, so there's something called Sail Forth 250 or Sail Forth New York. In New York Harbor on July 4th, there will be a whole bunch of old replica wooden ships. There was talk a couple of years ago of those coming all the way up to Albany, but most of them can't fit underneath the various Hudson River bridges. So the replacement, in lieu of getting all those tall ships to come up to Albany, is the USS. Is it Marriott?
yeah, Marionette.
No, it's not. It's not Internet. It's Marinette. Yeah, yeah. I believe it's USS Marinette, a warship. So that'll be coming up the Hudson River tomorrow, Friday. Should be in our area around 5 o'clock, 5:15 here in Germantown, and then going up to Albany after that. So yeah, make sure to come down to the river around 5 o'clock or so tomorrow. Keep an eye out for that ship as it comes north. Yes, Alvin.
The third part of the matter, we call him Robert Livingston Jr. Actually, his father was.
Yeah.
The reason why we call him Junior.
So yeah, that's interesting. So throughout history, that label junior and senior gets thrown around in some odd ways. I think the reason we called Robert Livingston Jr. the third Lord of the Manor, the reason we call him Robert Livingston Jr. is he's the second Robert Livingston who was a Lord of the Manor. That's my theory anyway. His father was Philip Livingston, the second Lord of the Manor, and Philip's father was Robert Livingston, the first Lord of the Manor. Robert Livingston the Elder, usually called in history books. Yeah, that's just an anomaly.
There's a lot of Robert Livingstons.
Endless amount of Robert Livingstons and almost as many Philip Livingstons too. So,
Junior, when they were small, or Livingston's at Claremont.
Yeah.
The old man.
you have a question, Martin?
Well, it's a query.
Yeah.
Kathy, my wife and I, moved down on Funk Road.
Yes.
Down by the river on Main Street.
Yeah.
And you mentioned something about Livingston's and Main Street and a dock.
That's Rockefeller, Philip Rockefeller.
Rockefeller,
Yes. Yeah.
Is there documentation of that? And we'll talk later.
There's some level of documentation. It's a little bit sketchy. We can take a look at the Rockefeller wills. We can take a look at D.L. Rockefeller Sr.'s will and see what level of description there is.
Waterfront access.
Oh yeah,
It's
yeah.
around that.
This is
We'll talk later.
yeah, absolutely. But yeah, D.L. Rockefeller Sr. He's not one of the original landowners in Germantown in 1741, but he purchases a site along Lower Main Street in 1751 that becomes his a mill, a grist mill, sawmill. And from that, from the wealth generated from that mill, he purchases a lot of land here in German Camp, East Camp, German Camp, and ends up with about 600 or so acres. That's 10% of East Camp by the time he dies in 1769. And it's kind of concentrated on what's now Main Street. So Deal Rockefeller Sr. and the wealth generated from that sawmill, grist mill along Lower Main Street. That's effectively what creates Main Street. That's why Main Street is the Main Street in
I
Germantown.
drive by that sign every day.
Yeah.
Thank you for the history part.
Yeah. So there wasn't an original sign there. Got hit by a plow. God knows how many times that got hit too hard one time, and now it lives at the history department.
It's too easy.
Yeah. So the original lives at the history department, and we got a replica to put on the pole
Thank you
there.
for that.
Yeah. Any questions from Zoom? I saw.
Just some comments, lots of thank you. Very interesting talk. And it says, thanks, Tom. I think we were all hoping some of the ships would come to Kingston, rats.
Yeah.
And I also said, you're right about the juniors, often not sons over here in Ulster, but named after grandfather, uncle, etc.
Yeah. So over there in Ulster, you have the DeWitts and the Rutsons and the Sharps, other Ulster County families. It's the same thing going on. Not quite standardized use of the term senior, junior, the third. So, luckily for us, with the Quartz family, who I mentioned earlier, it's a straight shot. John Quartz Senior, John Quartz Junior, John Quartz the third. Relatively straightforward naming conventions there. Any other questions?
Thank you.
All right. Thanks a lot, everybody.